Anthony Freda is a Long Island, New York-based illustrator, activist, and educator. Freda works as an editorial illustrator, visual political activist, and as part of the adjunct faculty of the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. In addition to many mainstream clients such as Time, The New Yorker, Rolling Stone, and The New York Times, he also contributes to many alternative news websites and publications such as Code Pink, Activist Post, Washington's Blog, Global Research, Cindy Sheehan's The Soapbox, and The Trends Journal. In 2006, the Village Voice commissioned Freda to illustrate a story about people who challenged the official 9/11 narrative. The artwork has since become part of the permanent collection of the U.S. National September 11th Museum in New York. Freda's work has been selected to be included in the following international illustration competitions: Society of Illustrators, American Illustration, Communication Arts, Society of Publication Designers, Print, and Art Directors Club. You can find out more about Anthony at his website, anthonyfredastudio. On Facebook, you can find him under anthonyfredastudio, or on Instagram, at anthonyfredaart. Welcome, Anthony Freda.
Thank you, Isaac. Great to be here.
Really nice to have you. So, I became aware of your artwork. I don't even remember exactly when. It was a long time ago, and it was via Facebook. So I continued to follow your work on Facebook, and some were much more hard-hitting for me personally than others, and I guess that goes with all art. Some were more apropos to certain, I don't know, eras or times in society when certain things seem to be prevalent. Just to name like one in particular that always was one of my favorites. It's so simple, and it's a sardonic satirization of our what I would call our national hypocrisy in regards to violence. So personally, I feel that the foundation of our national culture is violence. And it's hard to not see that, especially when you look at the fact that the grand majority of the discretionary federal budget goes to the Department of Defense, always, and that number only increases. So Americans seem to be very fine with us killing people that are innocent elsewhere, as long as we don't have to look at it or deal with it. But then when it comes to gun violence, everybody's very righteous. And so one of your pieces of art depicted that. It was a school teacher mirrored. So on one hand, she was saying drones are good violence, the guns are bad violence. So do you have a name for that one in particular, just so I don't keep referencing it obliquely?
I don't think I named that one. I did that a while ago, but yeah, that always struck me. I mean, you just said it very succinctly, perfectly. Violence is violence, and we have this double standard in our culture about a lot of things. But that's a big part of what I do in my work. Try to point out hypocrisy and double standard. Not that I'm some virtuous saint, believe me, I'm not, but I try to keep, try to live a good life. So it kind of, when you are a social critic, in a way, it forces you to be more analytical, introspective. So you're not just always criticizing the outside world or others. You're able to look in the mirror and see what, how you're contributing to any societal ills, or also just in your own personal life, you're really living up to a standard when you can make these comments about society and about politicians and about public figures. And so in a way, it keeps you honest, and it keeps you, on a morally straight path. So you don't become a hypocrite, or you don't live a hypocritical life, or staring into the abyss, become the abyss, that kind of thing. To answer your question, I didn't have a title for that one.
The Fashion Institute of Technology. So you're an adjunct professor, is that right?
Yes.
So part of your art is education. What are you teaching there?
I teach illustration appropriately. I'm primarily an illustrator, and my area of expertise, I would say. And so editorial illustration for magazines online publications and conceptual illustration. I taught a number of different classes, principles of illustration, visual communication. This semester I'm teaching a senior illustration workshop. So it's a very advanced class for kids, basically preparing them to make the transition from the academic world to the professional world. And for the first time, I just taught my classes online last semester, which was interesting experience. And there's pros and cons to that, but yeah, we don't know what's going to happen next semester yet. We haven't been told, so we'll see how that works out. But it's a challenge, and the students find it stressful. But it's, like I said, there's pros and cons. So I'm an illustration teacher, basically.
Now, education, I'm assuming, has not been how you got into art. It was a side effect of being an artist, I think, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I went to art school, went to Pratt in Brooklyn, and when I got out in the real world, I really felt like I wasn't prepared, and I was overwhelmed, and I felt kind of cheated after 4 years of school. I was never really prepared for what this career entails. I mean, they teach you how to draw and paint and think like an illustrator, which is great, but there's a lot more practical concerns. And I learned those the hard way, school of hard knocks. And I always said someday I'd like to give back and give our students the benefit of my knowledge, so maybe they won't have to learn it the hard way like I did. So it's really giving back, and it really is fulfilling to me to help these kids and to inspire them. I mean, to bring out the best work that they're capable of, because they don't even know sometimes what they're capable of. So you push them to create the best work they're capable of, and so you get these amazing results. So I mean, it's part motivational speaker and part art teacher. It's and part psychologist even. It's a lot of different hats you're wearing when you're teaching young kids, and at this very intense period of their life. But I love it. I really do. I really it's one of my favorite parts of my life.
What's your outlook as an educator with the younger generation?
So as an editorial illustrator, you are commenting on society. You get stories about, I've got stories about COVID, about race wars, you're getting stories about what's happening in the world, because that's what the media is reflecting, right? So I try to encourage my students the more personal you can make it, like you said, a mission. If you have a mission, if you have a cause that you're personally invested in or you care about, as an artist, you have an opportunity to make that connection between your cause and your art. And those are to me, the deepest connections you can make. And that, if you have a personal, interest or passion about this thing, then you can imbue your art with that. That's the most powerful art you're going to get. So I always try to get my students, I ask them, instead of just giving them an assignment, I try to find out personally, what do you care about? What do you want to say? What do you think is important? What do you want other people to know about? Or do you want some people to know about you? Is there anything, what interests you? Because I can always tell if an artist was painting something that they were interested in, or if they were painting something that they thought had a place in the market. So it's a huge difference. You can put your life force into something that you care about, something you're personally connected to, and if you don't, it's you're kind of going through the motions. So sometimes the great illustrator Baron Story said, sometimes illustrators are like whores faking orgasms, which is a little crass, but it gets to the heart of the matter, and you don't want to be like that. You want something genuine, something authentic. And I think people see that anyway. People are hungry for something real in all the age of, just fake news and artificial newscasters and canned talking points, and people connect with something real. You know, the old dinosaur media is, unfortunately, they still have a lot of power, as we see with this, the way they made everybody hysterical over COVID. And I don't think they're helping any situation. I think they kind of exacerbate every social ill. It's just built into the delivery method, the programming. But that's a whole other story. I don't want to go there. But as far as an artist, like I say, connecting something you care about and putting that passion, every stroke, putting your life force into, and your love of that subject, it shows, and it resonates with the viewer, and they know it. They know it just looking at it instinctively. They know if you put some real time and energy and life force into something, or if you just phoned it in. So yeah, I encourage them to make those connections with their art. I think it's really important. And I think that's a big part of being an artist. You know, what do you got to say? It's like, to me, I was never the greatest draftsman or painter. You know, so I had to find my strength was more not as a technical virtuoso, but as someone who could think conceptually and try to say things with passion, but also a little bit of humor and dark humor, and make it palatable in a way. Because if you're talking about subjects like war and injustice and all these other very serious topics, you got to temper it with humor, you know, otherwise it just gets, it's too dense and it turns people off. And it's like Oscar Wilde said, if you're going to tell somebody the truth, make them laugh. It's that kind of thing. So
yeah I share that frustration of, you know, there are things that happen that are so serious on such a regular basis now. You know, when you find out that XYZ thing happened, you know, Black Lives Matter is a perfect example. That you find out that so-and-so was killed and they were in their own apartment and they weren't doing anything, but it was a no-knock thing. The appropriate reaction is, what the f-? But instead, everybody's like, not everybody, but some people are just like, well, let's look at the whole story. I mean, and what? There's some kind of quote that was about my desire to be well informed is at odds with my desire to be sane and happy, something like that.
Yeah.
I was a political activist for a long time back home in San Diego, what I call home, and so yeah, I was becoming a very unhappy human being, and like a lot of activists, you go so full force that eventually you burn yourself out, and you're looking for results. You're like, well, nothing's changing even though I'm lobbying. Nothing's changing even though I'm marching and contributing to anti-war efforts, and finding out that those, you know, the move-ons and et cetera, they didn't really care about the war. They cared about a Republican being the one leading the war, because once it was a Democrat, they were perfectly fine with war.
That was a big problem. Yeah, I was involved with the anti-war movement, and I still am, but I worked with Cindy Sheehan, and she couldn't get 3 people together for a rally in the 8 years Obama was in. But so, you know, when he was destroying Libya, nobody cared. So it was, partisanship, you know, makes you myopic and half blind in one eye, you know.
So my question for you, being someone who is an activist, is when the Black Lives Matter thing happened and George Floyd and then the protest, I was so happy that people were finally being emotionally unhinged enough to get out there and march. And just because I don't know what else to do, like, and you've given me all this time off to not work. So,
yeah.
You know, so I was so encouraged by that now
in New York, that's the only thing you could do. Everything else is closed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, but eventually I was just this wild man on Facebook, just posting everything that I felt was important, losing myself in the process, not being centered. I'm a spiritual person, so being centered is important to me. And then I saw this quote about inner peace, and I shared it, and I said basically that, like, I still feel like I have inner peace, but I allow myself to become unglued.
Yeah.
And it's not like I have inner turmoil. I know who I am, and I know what I call God and my place. I know that space, that my core. But how do I maintain really being at peace in the middle of all this stuff? Is that a struggle for you as someone who is aware of what's going on, but also wanting to be able to just not go crazy? I mean,
yeah, no, you do. You get, I mean, when you're in this stuff, it's so dark, a lot of it. And the more you, I mean, I'm sure you've gone down a lot of rabbit trails, just investigations into history and into deep state and into what's really going on, the things you're not going to hear on CNN. I mean, it's just shocking, and it's just devastating. And it's way worse than you think. You know, they didn't teach you this stuff in high school, which, you know, things that are going on, the manipulations, you know, Operation Mockingbird, a lot of complicity between the deep state and the media. And it's just so undemocratic, and it's so opaque, and there's no transparency to so much of what goes on that's not shared with us. So there are whistleblowers, and there are people that you know, risk everything to get this information out there. I had the great pleasure of meeting William Binney, who was really the first NSA whistleblower, and he quit because he said, "You guys, you're breaking the law. This is illegal surveillance." And so, and for his troubles, they SWAT teamed his house and tried to falsely charge him. There's a great movie, The Good American, about him. But just a sweet man, and just he tells you these stories, and you cannot believe how. I mean, it's a completely criminal, and it's beyond Democrat, Republican. It's just they're all guilty in the last since 2000 of massive crimes, and I mean everybody in Congress. I mean, they sign on to things that are just completely illegal and across the board. And he lays it out very, you know, from a legal standpoint, and it's shocking. And like you said, what do you do with this information? You can go crazy, or you go on Facebook and scream about it, or you get an argument with your friends at the bar. It's like, that's totally wasted effort. So I channel that into my art, and that to me is a catharsis. The act of creation itself is an act of hope, but it also is a way to, when you're transforming these negative emotions into something creative, you know, there's a cathartic process. And in the end, you can take anger and hopefully and pity and transform it into something that's positive, like hope. But spirituality is key too. I agree with you. You have to have a spiritual component in your life. I mean, I didn't for a long time, and I was really unhappy. It wasn't until I reconnected with that spiritual part that's in all of us. Instead of denying it, I embraced it, and it puts things in perspective. So you have the temporal plane, and you have the spiritual plane, and you start to see the vastness of it, and you start to see this idea that you're connected to the universe, which is this cosmic consciousness, and you're a fragment of it. And if you want to call it God or cosmic consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it is you, and you are it. So we're part of something much bigger than all of the insanity going on right in front of us. And also when you study history, you get perspective on just how insane things can get. And even though they seem really crazy right now, it's like, it's been a lot worse for a lot of people. So that gives you perspective too. But you need, you know, there has to be an ebb and flow, right? You got to keep your mind right. You have to, you know, meditation is important, and communing with nature and breathing. And there's a lot of different things you can do, you know, whatever works for you personally. But yeah, you got to get offline sometimes too. If you just, you know, if you're living in front of a screen day and night, you're going to lose it. I mean, there's thousands of studies now, very clear. The science is in, you know, the more time you spend on a screen, the more depressed you get. The more time you spend on social media, the more depressed you get. So there's a direct correlation there. So we're not designed to be in front of screens. This is not, you know, this is something very new to us as a species. And we're still trying to, obviously, have growing pains trying to figure out how to work it. We're all on Facebook screaming at each other. And it's just not a natural way for us to communicate.
Right.
And we all know the problems that are inherent, but also in the way that they were designed. I think they were designed, like the Facebook's designed, to exploit human frailties and to give them a place where they can flourish rather than, and they admitted it, some of the people that designed those systems admitted they were looking to get people addicted, like you would if you were designing a slot machine, So there's a lot of problems that are built into the whole design that are very difficult to reverse now because it's in the architecture of the systems that we all use. So, but there's one poetic justice I love is using Facebook to call out Zuckerberg or to talk about what I was just talking about. I mean, to me, that's poetic justice, using the systems and platforms designed to, I think, hurt humanity in a lot of ways, to expose the fact that that's what they're doing. So
when I first started coming to New York for auditions and little commercials or industrials and stuff like that, before I decided this is where I need to be, I was driving to New York. First of all, I hated New York City until I stopped driving in it. Because if you're
I know.
It's a good way. I'm a peaceful person. I straight up got out of my car once and was ready to beat the crap out of somebody behind me. Like, that's what New York did to me. But once I started realizing that that's why God created Newark, because there's a train you can take you to New York, it got really clear to me that there's, like, New York City has got a solid grasp of fascism because there's cameras everywhere to watch. And so the NYPD can see what you're doing at every moment, anywhere. Aside from the fact that we carry our phones, and if someone really wanted to find us and, know where we were, what we were up to, it would be easy to do so. But New York makes it a lot easier. And so this is home to you. This is what you've always known, is this culture.
Well, I was always interested in history, and I was just naturally gifted as an artist. It's just something I could do. I was the kid who was the best in the art class in high school. Not that I was some genius or anything, but I was, in my little high school, kids would, ask me to do drawings for them. And my first, paid drawing was probably I was 10 or something. Some kid asked me to draw something for him and gave me like 50 cents or something. So, and I would draw on my notebooks, and I would draw on my desk, and I was always, and I would make commentaries about certain things, but I was always interested in history, and I was always interested in this, for some reason, just dystopian sci-fi. I just latched onto that, 1984 and Brave New World and a bunch of other ones that I just really got into at a really young age, just because I was always interested in what the future held for us, and I was always terrified of the prospect that it might be something that's horrible, like these books are all saying, and that if there is a possibility of that, then we need to warn people. And so I thought about being basically an artist version of George Orwell, like what he was. I mean, I think that whole book was a warning to humanity, and not a instruction manual, which some people are using it for. But so I wanted to do the same thing with my art. And that book is just, it's lost its potency comparisons to it just because it's been overdone so many times. People use the term 1984, but we're living it now. COVID 1984 is here, where they have the slogans and nothing makes sense and everything's contradictory and everything doesn't add up. 2 + 2 = 5. And one day the masks are good, one day the masks are bad. And social distancing is completely, you're going to die if you don't social distance. But then we have these protests and everybody's, tens of thousands of people cramped together, and that's fine. oh, wait, last week you said if I did that, we were all going to die, and nobody dies. So it's just, I mean, to me, it's like a confusion technique where you can, Milton Erickson, the psychologist, came up with this technique where you confuse somebody, and people hate being confused so much that the first thing after being confused, whatever idea you put out there that makes sense, they latch onto. So it's a technique of getting somebody to accept a message using this confusion method. And I feel like it's mass confusion method going on right now. And the idea of the new normal, I mean, that's all these terms, is like they're straight out of Orwell. I mean, it's crazy, That book was just so prescient, and the surveillance with the camera. I mean, in our homes, we have cameras in our homes. We have little monitoring devices. They're everywhere, and they didn't come by fiat. They came by choice. Because one thing he didn't think of was attaching entertainment to them, and that was a brilliant way to get them in your house. And now, first it's entertainment, and now it's public health, right? You have to give up your privacy and your rights for the greater public good. I'm not buying it, but I don't know if you've read about contact tracing, but that's a whole other story, but it's terrifying. And it's worse than 1984. They basically, you test positive, you are owned by the state. You are their prisoner for the rest of your life, and you do what they say, and that's it. You lose every right, and it's madness, but it's happening right now. It's not a book anymore in the future. So I was always obsessed with that, and I always just wanted to get on that train and warning people that let's not go down this path, And there was a point where I thought things were going to be really positive. I remember I used to read the magazine back in like the 80s and 90s, and it was a futurist, but it was mostly positive futures. Some of the more positive sci-fi writers like Isaac Asimov and a few of the other guys that were envisioning these more positive technological utopias, And then once we got here, I was very disappointed with the 21st century, I mean, it's just not what we were promised, we're just, I mean.
Instead of flying cars, we're still saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill black people for no reason, and maybe we shouldn't be spending the grand majority of our money on military. Maybe, we're not living in the euphoric utopian society that a lot of us were thinking of anyway.
Yeah, no, and the big bad pictures haven't changed, and then we're all fighting over everything just electronically. It facilitates our. I mean, it's ironic in so many ways. We're more connected yet more alienated at the same time, and that paradox is just fascinating to me. So these are all the issues I talk about in my work, and it's always changing. So I have an endless supply of material, and but there are these themes of privacy, of personal liberty, and of justice and social justice, and war and peace. These themes don't seem to ever go away. So unfortunately, I can, and the symbology just changes with each new crises. So I can just employ these new icons into my artwork, but the themes remain the same.
So art entered your life at a very early age. When did the political awareness start to take shape?
I don't know. I was always interested in it. I remember I would collect the editorial cartoons. At one point I thought I wanted to be an editorial cartoonist, and I've done some of that, but there's something about cartoons that just, it's, when you have to put bubbles with people saying things, it's not really visual art as much anymore, and it becomes too literal and too specific. I want things that might have more than one meaning, and I want the viewer to be engaged. I want the viewer to bring, like, if I show a lot of my work to people and ask them what they think, I'll get totally different points of view. So I want it to be a conversation, not just a lecture. Like, what do you think this means? And and look, what is it, you know, and people tell me things about my work that I never thought of, which I love, because I wasn't thinking that, but they were. So it stirred something in their imagination. And I love that. And I love that it can have multiple interpretations rather than me just saying, this is what it means, you know. And so I try, so, you know, as an artist, you're trying to balance clarity and mystery. And if it's too clear, then it's too much clarity. It becomes banal and boring, and predictable, right? But if it's too mysterious, then it's in the realm of fine art, where it's not going to work for political art because nobody knows what the hell you're trying to say. So, so you have to find that balance, and I think that's what I'm trying to do. But specifically, I didn't really get hardcore political with my art until 9/11. I mean, before that, I was commenting on school shootings a lot. But then 9/11, I saw it happen from my apartment, and it changed my focus, and it made me go down some rabbit holes. And I haven't come out of the hole since. For good or bad, I don't know. Probably both.
Yeah, that's one of the other things that you and I have in common. I was politically aware to a degree until 9/11, but that is when I started to say, like, what's happening? I need to know what's, you know, somewhere this started before buildings were being blown up and people were jumping out of the windows. Like, how does this happen? And so that's when my activism really like went into overdrive and started to take over my life, really. And some of the people that you and I also have in common, although I've not worked with them, with the exception of donations or some kind of support, are Code Pink and Cindy Sheehan. Nothing but respect for Cindy, what she's chosen to do with her life since her son was needlessly killed. And Code Pink, I've got nothing but respect for them. I mean, going in, getting arrested like any good activist would, because it's going to make a statement. Obama says, hey, insurance companies, how should we write this new healthcare? Tell me, because we're going to make sure that there's no public option at all. It's going to make sure that it's written the way you want it to. Code Pink right in there. Like, hey, what about Medicare for all? What about single payer? Like, could we please arrest them because we're doing business?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you and I have those in common, and I'm glad that they are selfless enough to do what they're doing.
They got guts.
Most definitely.
And they, like, you know, now it's like very popular, but they, you know, they were doing it when it wasn't very popular, and you weren't making friends doing it, and you were getting arrested, and it wasn't fun. But they were consistent. They were with their messaging, morally consistent. If it doesn't matter if it was a red president or a blue president, they were consistent. So not many people are. So yeah, you're right. They need respect for that.
Absolutely, because they're just doing what's right, and that's something that I've personally struggled with. Is that it seems to me that some of the root of our problems is that the only way people could fall for so much stuff, I think, is if they really don't know right from wrong. They have no moral barometer. And I don't know how that is possible. I don't know. There are some spiritual beliefs that say your belief in morality is a sign of your immaturity, and that there's no such thing as morals.
Yeah.
I have a problem, subscribing to that, because it does seem to me that there's obviously right and wrong. We should all agree you shouldn't rape children, right? Can we agree that's wrong? Yeah. Can we agree that, like, being good to one another is good? Like, I think that there are certain things that are clearly right or wrong.
Absolutely. It's natural law. I don't know if you know who Mark Passio is.
I don't.
He's done, watch some great presentations he's done on natural law. So natural law, he says, is just the basic guiding principles of the universe. And there definitely is right and wrong. And basically, wrong is anytime you harm another person. That's it. You have no right under any circumstances to harm another person. But you have the right to do anything up to that point. So it's pretty simple stuff, like the golden rule, basically. But I know what you're talking about. I don't ascribe to that. I mean, there is right and wrong. There is polarity, and maybe there's some place in the future where we get beyond polarity and we get beyond right and wrong, good and evil. I don't know, but we're a long way from that. I mean, there is wrong, and there it is black and white. Some of it. There's some gray areas, and there's things that can be debated, which is we're constantly all doing. And this can be different points of view. But there's some things that are just straight up wrong, and that's the things that we like to call out because I think that's incumbent on artists. I think part of what you do. I mean. It's funny because a lot of artists I know were never political until recently. Now they're all political. Right? Every artist I know never did anything political. They're all political artists now. So it's interesting. Kind of a crowded field. It used to be a pretty lonely field, but not anymore.
This is an open-ended question. It's very vague, but like, what is your artistic vision? Knowing what your spiritual outlook is, your political outlook, the fact that you want to help guide a younger generation into art. What is that vision?
My goal is to take these ideas of peace and individual liberty and freedom and human dignity and free humanity and give people alternative ways of looking at things rather than this opposition to the juggernaut of mainstream groupthink and the uniformity of messaging. I'm not just a nonconformist, I'm an anti-conformist. I think conformity is the enemy of creativity, and it's the enemy of humanity, it's the enemy to free speech. And I think we need different voices. We need alternative voices. We don't need to censor them. All this censorship is anathema to liberty, anathema to human progress and human freedom. Let everybody speak. If you don't like what they have to say, then use your speech to do so, to tell them, and to make a better argument. So I'm a voice for freedom, for free humanity, and everything I do is towards that end. And this is what I'm dedicated to. So we don't get these dystopian futures that we talked about before, which we're about this close to getting. So maybe we have a chance to save humanity and pull things back from the brink, but we are at the brink, baby.
Most definitely. That was beautifully said, Anthony. So I thank you so much, brother. This has been a real treat for me.
Oh, me too, man. You look familiar. I must have seen you something.
I was a busy actor. Last year I completed 43 projects last year in New York.
Wow.
Yeah,
I've definitely seen you. But I'm gonna check out more of your work. And thank you so much for everything you're doing. And great to meet you, man.
Likewise. And maybe we can have you on one of our traditional episodes sometime to really talk about life stuff.
That'd be fun.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, Anthony.